What's that? Bringing it back.
All the way back. So we have hit a milestone. We are 10 episodes deep officially.
Yay! I know all the LDBs are so excited. Can you hear them cheering on three-way
Clap
right
it up,
now? Can
clap
you
it
hear
up,
them?
clap it up, clap it up. So in honor of our 10th episode, our 10th not so private conversation, we have a very special conversation with an extremely dope, influential creative. And
Yeah.
she has her hand in a few really powerful organizations, and she comes up with these great ideas. She was actually a huge proponent for us starting this podcast. She was 100% supportive from the jump.
She was.
And you need people like that who will root for you and support you. And little known fact, she is low key the reason why we do hashtag wise words at the end of the episodes. So she took my favorite Twitter hashtag, which is hashtag wise words, and I contribute to it often, especially in the past. I think that's really how I built a lot of my Twitter following, was from using that hashtag. And she actually used her creative powers to basically alley-oop me the idea to incorporate hashtag wise words into our conversation in the podcast. So she might not even know it, but she is a creative contributor to our podcast.
You know what? That's crazy because I didn't even know.
Yeah, I know. So it's like little known fact. So
I haven't talked to Dacia since like high school, like probably middle school, but I've still been following her on social media, especially recently. And she's been doing like a lot of things that have been making a strong impact in the community. And she's been making like great moves out here. So I'm excited to speak to her.
Yeah, so we just got so excited and we didn't even like introduce who we were talking to. So we're gonna have on Dacia Idom. She is a dope human being, and she is a digital coordinator and content creator. She is a photographer and a poet, and she is the founder of this community organization called Stand with Purpose. So without further ado, let's call Dacia.
Hey.
There she is. What it do? So first of all, how are you doing in these COVID times, Dacia, especially here in Houston?
Oh man, that's a tough question. It's a combination of a lot of things. It's a lot going on, like with COVID-19, and then we also have all the racial and police brutality stuff happening.
Right.
Dealing with all of that at once is a lot, especially because, as Black people, we are disproportionately affected by both.
Right.
So, just trying to stay safe. I have been trying to stay in, and I've gone out. Before the numbers started going up, I went out like with a mask and I've eaten out. But then when it started getting bad again, I was like, okay, I guess it's back to like grocery store and staying home. So
Yep. Locking it
that's
back
kind of
down.
where I am now, just trying to stay inside as much as possible. And my circle has been pretty, like, very, very small. So I really haven't interacted with like a lot of new people. It's basically been the same individuals, and everybody's kind of like on the same page of, okay, we're not gonna like go out and go out. You have on your mask and all of that. So just trying to stay safe. And then, with as far as quarantine, just trying to keep your mental space right, because I feel like that's the other side of it, is like you have the physical space and then you have like the mental aspect of it.
Right.
Yeah.
How's that affected Photos by Dacia? How's the quarantine affected like your businesses that you have?
Yeah, so I actually have paused photo shoots for a while. I did one like during this period, and I wore a mask and I stayed far back from them. But it just it's hard to do because as a photographer, you're talking to people and you're
Mhm.
trying to help them position correctly in different poses and all that kind of stuff. So I just think it's a different experience to have
Right.
to have that distance, and you just want to make sure you're not like talking over
Right.
people.
Right.
And so I really haven't done a lot of in-person things. One of the things that I've been trying to promote more is I do sell like travel prints. So I've been sharing that link as
Hmm.
something that people can still, be a part of that my business, but not necessarily having to do like in-person stuff.
So you were talking about the mental aspect of dealing with quarantine. What are you doing for self-care? How are you seeing to it that you take proper care of yourself?
Yeah, so a combination of things. Talking to like my family and friends is very helpful for me.
Mhm. Mhm.
And
Right.
just talking it out and kind of releasing, because I have a habit of internalizing a lot.
Ooh, me
So
too.
Same, girl.
so it's helpful for me to, and then of like poetry helps me too, because writing helps kind of like process some of the stuff that's happening. So, talking to friends, I also like, my faith is really important to me.
Mhm.
So just like prayer and like reading the Bible, and then
Mhm.
also I'm about to get back into therapy. I've gone to therapy before, but I kind of took like a little break. But I'm in a process where I know that is really helpful for me, and
Mhm.
Right.
so the therapist, she's doing virtual sessions right now. So I'm going to go ahead and like start doing that so that I can help process some of what's going on.
Yeah. Hey,
Yeah.
Jean and I are both in therapy,
Both in
so
therapy, girl.
Yeah.
Both.
so it's extremely important. We know exactly what you mean.
Oh, yes. It's like one of those things where, I mean, you like always feel like, "Oh, I'm good. Like, I'm good.
Mhm. Mhm.
Right.
I'm
Right.
so good." And then, I think one of the things that therapy does so well is it makes you look back at yourself and just
Mhm.
look within and ask yourself why about a lot of things, of like why you do the things you do, and then make those connections of
Yeah.
when that started or where that came from or when did
Right.
it,
Yep.
start surfacing. And I think
Even the things you don't wanna confront. Even the
correct.
things you don't wanna confront. Mhm.
Exactly. And I think that's the hardest thing, because in therapy I learned a lot about vulnerability. And
Right.
Woo! That is the number one topic of 2020.
I
Man, vulnerability.
Yeah, so it's so interesting because I always thought that I was like such this open person and like, oh, but I realized that I really wasn't. Like I
Mhm.
had a lot of
Mhm.
barriers up, and I'm very social, very friendly, but that's not the same as
Mhm.
open.
It's not. It's not.
Yeah.
So yeah, it
'Cause
taught me a lot about like just, a lot of that comes with fear. And then my
Mhm.
therapist, Brene Brown, was somebody that she had me kind of like look at her work
Yes.
about vulnerability and shame.
Yes. Yes. That book
Um,
is amazing.
yeah, so I think that it's just one of those things where a lot of times we don't even know. Like,
Mhm.
you just
Yeah.
won't
Right.
know. Like, you either have learned certain techniques or coping methods and all of these
Mhm.
things, and then you start really taking time to learn more, and maybe
Mhm.
things that, it's not a thing
Mhm.
about blame or who didn't teach you this or why we didn't learn this, but as adults we
Right.
can take on that responsibility and say, hey, I want to grow in this area. How can I do that?
Mhm.
Exactly.
Yep.
It's not just that, but how also can you break that curse? Because for me, like a lot of the things that I'm facing in therapy is generational. So I have to
Right.
Mhm.
decide if I want to move forward and break this curse so I can be better along the line. But it's amazing that you're back into therapy and congratulations to you because that's not a
Yeah.
small feat. It takes a
Yeah.
lot for you to start the first time and it takes a lot for you to go back again. So,
Yeah.
give yourself a
Mhm.
pat on the back. It's you
For
deserve
sure.
a hand clap and a
Mhm.
congratulations for it.
Thank you. I appreciate
Yeah,
that. It's like
seriously.
I just feel like the work is never done, like It
Yeah,
might be
yeah.
Right.
bad too, because I struggle with perfectionism. So
Same. Same.
and so and that's something I learned too about just like how much I depend on achievement and how that's connected to my identity. And
Mhm, mhm.
Girl, you did you speak to my therapist for
I
my
know, right?
session last week? Because
Right?
this is literally what we talked about. Literally what we talked about.
Jeez.
But Dacia, I heard you talk about your poetry being your therapy, and I know that you have your organization Stand with Purpose. Can you tell us a little bit about Stand with Purpose and how it got started?
yes, okay, so Stand with Purpose, I actually founded it in 2015. And
Mhm.
it was one of those things that had been on my heart, and I am very passionate about youth, and the arts, and then specifically Black youth. So I have to like start by saying that when I first was writing my mission statement, my brother is one of my mentors. He's my brother, but he's also a mentor to me.
Mhm.
Right.
And he's a social entrepreneur, and so he's had a business that has also involved a lot of community work and just very community minded, that yes, you know, you make money, but then there's also like a social responsibility to what we do in our communities. And so he
Right.
Right.
has like coat drives and book pack drives, and they have a nonprofit where they work with the homeless and all these things. So when I was starting Stand with Purpose, I reached out to him and I was like, hey, I'm really going forward with this organization and this nonprofit, but I'm just not sure if I should include the word Black before youth.
Mm.
Because in my mission statement, I say that we're creating safe spaces for Black youth to express themselves through the arts, specifically photography and poetry. So when I was writing it, I came to this point and I got nervous about like, I mean, I know I want it to be for Black youth, but then, like, the opposition that might come against me because, people
Mhm.
might feel like, oh my gosh, like, shouldn't it just be for youth? Like,
Mm.
why do
Right.
you
Mhm.
have to say Black?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so I called him, and I think one of the great things about people who are really good at mentorship is they allow you to answer your own questions. Because a lot of times
Yeah.
we have our own answers. We already have the answer. But a lot of times
Yeah.
we're just
Right.
looking for validation from somebody else because we don't trust ourselves enough.
Yes.
So
Mhm.
Yes.
I called and I said, okay, I told him about the situation, and he said, well, what has God laid on your heart? Like,
Mhm.
why do you want to create this? And I said, because I don't feel that Black children have enough spaces where they can freely express themselves. And he said, well, it sounds like that's your mission.
There you
And
go.
so
Right.
Mhm.
I think that sometimes we already know like the path that we want to take, and the gifts and the purpose we have inside of us, but we're looking for someone else to validate it and someone else to say yes, or like, yes, that's the right way to do it.
Mhm.
But it's that trust that, like, hey, God has given me this, and this is on my heart, and this is the things that I know I should be doing. And it's like, okay, we'll start doing it. I'm just so much more confident in my identity and being Black. And I don't think I would ask those questions now that I was asking in 2015.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I'm thankful for that, because it's like I don't need anybody's permission and I don't need anybody's agreement to create a
Mhm.
safe space for Black people, but
Mhm.
that is so much ingrained in our society that it's not okay when every other culture celebrates their culture and all of these things. But it's like for us, it's always this negative thing. And so
Right.
I just had to kind of move through that. And a lot of that
Mhm.
is just learning more and just
Yeah.
getting a better foundation of who I am and where I come from. And then once I did that, it's like, okay, those conversations are no longer even in my mind.
Right,
Mhm.
right,
But they
right.
used to be. They used to be. And so I'm glad about that growth. So
Mhm.
I've been a part of really impactful programs through journalism and poetry and writing and sports. This this
Mhm.
place that, hey, you're going here and you're going to get something out of it. And hopefully, when you come out of it, you're stronger, you're better, you're wiser, or you're just, you just know a little more. And so that's
Right.
what I want to create. I want to create those spaces where Black children can go and nobody's telling them that they're wrong for thinking what they think and that
Mhm.
that's
Mhm.
offensive or you shouldn't think like that or you're overreacting, calm
Mhm.
down. All those just like things that we're told constantly in
Mhm.
different places in our life. So, I mean, for some people, that's their home.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
Right.
for some people, that's church. For some people, that's school. It's a classroom.
Mhm.
So, sadly, even places that are supposed to be safe may not be that for us. And we see that people in their homes murdered. So
Oh,
it's
yeah.
just
Oh,
like
yeah.
our experience is so different. And I just want to be a part of creating spaces that really celebrate us and really just offer like just a moment of freedom or just like a
Mhm.
moment of acceptance or being okay with who you are and that being celebrated there. So that's kind of like the whole idea behind Stand with Purpose.
Mhm.
That's really amazing.
Yeah, the purpose of
Yeah.
standing with purpose, yeah.
It's amazing
Definitely.
creating these intentional spaces because this is it has its purpose. It is on purpose. A really
Right.
intentional space where Black youth are safe and through these different vehicles, you can also instill confidence in them. And I'm all about teaching our youth to understand that they have a voice and that they can use their voice. And Stand with Purpose is the perfect platform for how they can go about doing this. So that's what made me really reach out to you when you mentioned doing that video poetry project. I was just like, oh my gosh, I want to be a part of this so bad. And it turned out more perfect than I think I could have imagined. I didn't even know
Yes.
exactly what it was gonna be, but I think Jeanne finally saw the video today, and I
Mhm.
watch the video all the time, and I'm like, "This
She
is
told me about
so
it.
good."
She was so excited about it when she did it. But then she did it and she's like never like sent me the video or anything.
I
So I was just like,
did.
I thought it was
I
no,
said
you didn't. So I thought it was like a private thing you were doing. So I was like, oh, maybe this is just like a
Oh,
private thing and it's not out yet.
this is before your Instagram resurgence, because Jeanne has been
Yeah,
social distancing from social
that
media
is
for, like,
true.
5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
So
kind of like a lurker. I just go to explore page and I look at cool stuff like food
she
and
doesn't
I
look at
just
her
log off.
followers because it's definitely on my Instagram page, but she just looks at the explore page.
Well, I'm so glad. Yeah, and I really appreciate you being a part of it. Like, and
It
I
was so much fun.
applaud you. And I admire teachers so much. I think it's one of the like most important professions. And I apologize on behalf of our society.
Right.
Like you aren't treated as such, but
I
it is
know.
like it is so important and you pour into like kids and so
Mhm.
much and
Mhm.
spend so much time with them and like have the ability to either like bring them up or
Mhm.
just
Mhm.
Right.
further
Mhm.
like discourage. So
Right.
How many stories have you heard about of a teacher actually discouraging a kid from living their dream? So Mia, it really is amazing what you do because we talk about what you do all the time and
Right.
it really should be celebrated more often. So she's absolutely right.
I think about, as a community or a collective, how each of us have to do our part in quote unquote being the change, using our influence for good, for activism, for promoting the right things. And I think that this was like what I really wanted us all to focus on. We got the perfect person on to talk
Right.
about what you are specifically doing and putting out in the world to be the change. I was like, stand with purpose.
Right.
That's
Mhm.
like the number one thing that stood out to me. You know, me being a teacher, a lot of days I do not feel like I'm doing much of anything
Mhm.
because it almost feels like day in and day out, it's the same bull crap until
Mhm.
you reach certain points in the year and you realize, oh, they did learn something. Oh, they were listening to me. It's like
Right.
if you are looking to start a nonprofit or if you're looking to get into the profession of education or teaching, you do this is not you're not doing this for the rewards
Right.
because there's far more work than there are rewards. But
Mhm.
I don't know, it's something about getting that one kid,
Mhm.
that one boy or girl, for if getting it to click for them is worth the years of pain and agony
Yeah.
and
That's
failure, like, that's what really keeps me going, and I'm like, you know, anybody who's in the business of working with kids, you have to understand that you really are playing the long game, and you're
Ooh,
not gonna
yes,
get
girl.
quick returns on
right.
your investment when it comes to, like, dealing with these kids because they have so many different, especially when you're talking about Black youth, they have so much against them.
Right.
Even if they grew up as the model kid, they have the fact that the world just looks at them a certain way against them.
Exactly. Exactly.
And
Right.
so it's like I this is a part of us being able to do what we can do. We may not be able to change the world, but there's something that we can do right here, right now in these
Mhm.
conversations and putting them out and what we do in our everyday lives that will push us forward. And if everybody is just doing that little part, progress will have to be
Yes.
made. Like it has to
Right.
be made.
Yes. I man, I believe so wholeheartedly in the individual impact and the power of
Mhm. Mhm.
individuals, and that idea that if we are all working and we have this community minded, outlook, that these little small daily acts are what
Mhm.
changes. Like that's what creates
Mhm.
change is an individual within their space. Because our
Mhm.
neighborhoods, our communities, our cities, our states, like that's where you start.
Yeah,
And
right.
it
Right.
Right.
blossoms from there. And even beyond that, your home. Like the family unit is the most impact that anybody can make because
Mhm.
that is the foundation of everything. So it's
Yep.
like,
Mhm.
I think that sometimes, it's this mindset that you have to be known or your name has to be recognized or somebody has to know your face. But
Mhm.
it's I think those individual one-on-one interactions are just it's so much more common and in a lot of ways more powerful because they happen more often.
Mhm.
I had
Mhm.
a lot of amazing teachers. Like I just really admire teachers because the ones who, like you say, are in it for like that passion and like really wanting to make a difference. I also think that like when you're in a classroom, you don't really understand the impact of that teacher, I think maybe until further down the line.
That
Right.
So
is so
Right.
true.
it's probably some students in your classroom where you probably feel like, oh my goodness, like I am just not like getting
Mhm.
to them. But then who
Mhm.
knows? They might see you 10 years down the line and say, man, I didn't know how to express that to you at the time, but you changed my life, you know?
Mhm.
So
That is
Mhm.
so
we just
true.
never know. Like, we just never know people's stories. And we just never know how that, just encouragement and motivation is really helping somebody, even if they can't
Right.
like express it at the time.
Mhm. That's
You know,
exactly right.
I was a mentor for high school students, and I had a mentee. He was a football player, and I was helping him with his senior project. And it just goes back to what you said. Like I thought that I was not getting through to him. Like at one point I was even getting annoyed with him, but I made sure that I just kept being patient because at one point I kind of realized like, this is not his fault. He's a product of his circumstances.
Hmm.
And then like after he graduated and he ended up getting a football scholarship, he sent me this long email and it was just like thanking me for everything that I did. And I was a project manager at the time for a nonprofit. that rebuild homes in like, disenfranchised communities. He actually switched his major to do something in construction management because
Wow.
of me. So
The
that
impact.
really goes back to what you said. Like a lot of times you think you're doing something small and you're not making an impact at all, but you have no idea what you're doing for that person. Like you
Mhm.
have no idea. Like you can be that person in their life that just never took the person that never took the time out to just give them what they needed. You probably are being that person you don't even realize. So
Mhm.
I know Mia on a bigger scale when she has like 30 people in a classroom, like I know that she's making like it's still a small impact compared to what it should be, but it's still an impact because you have also read letters from students that we
Yeah.
talked about all semester long.
Yeah. Like, I'm like, going into, I guess this year will be my 3rd or 4th year, 3rd year maybe. I have students
Mhm.
who like, the students that I came in on graduated this past year.
Oh,
And so, of
wow.
course, I feel some kind of way. And so I got a couple letters and they were like, "You are the only reason why I passed my senior year
Mhm.
because I needed to get that English 2 credit and I kept failing it since the 10th grade. And you helped me pass. Your tutorials helped, or
Mhm.
you telling me to think about it this way or do this or do that or go talk to this person helped
Mhm.
me. And you helped me graduate." And it's like, of 150 kids, that one kid came back
Right.
and
Right.
said something small like that. It makes the last 3 years worth it, with
Right.
everything, with Hurricane Harvey, with COVID, with all of this stuff going on, with all types of like school stuff happening. It made every single thing worth it. So Kerry Washington has this quote, because Kerry is like my bestie. Y'all didn't know. Tell me now. Kerry
So
Washington,
you were
we're
probably
friends.
very offended by all the memes of people when they do her.
I sent them to her in a text
I
message.
died because yeah,
Like,
I died.
it was like, just in
But
case you didn't see him online, here you go.
here, thank you. So she has this quote. And because she's done a lot of like activism work, and I definitely like admire her too. She has this quote that says, "Think globally, but act locally." Because when you think about when you're out to change the world, I'm not going to change the world. Me by
Mhm.
myself, I'm not going to change the world. But if I have these global ideas and I can translate them into just my localized area, not even Houston, but if I work in my home or in my school or in my neighborhood, I can affect some kind of change. And that's the mindset that, like
Mhm.
your nonprofit has, that Jeanne has with all of her work, that's the work, that the idea that I have with my work. If we all approach it that way, these amazing ideas, and then we just do our small part, we will push the needle forward. I wholeheartedly believe that.
Definitely.
That show's true, but at the same time, Mia, it is so stressful. So I am glad to have friends like you who will push me and be like, "You can do
Let's
it,"
go.
because it's
Let's
not
work.
easy. It's not
It's
easy
not.
like
It's
doing
really
that
not.
work because it really at some points it feels like you're doing all this work for people and you're not what's the return?
Right.
So,
Right.
it's good to have people in your life and LDBs who call you and
Mhm.
check up on
Mhm.
you and check up on your mental
Mhm.
health and also push you and tell you that you can do this. It's like when I saw you getting excited about your students getting it, I was like, "Are you sure you're ready to leave this school? Because I don't think you're ready to leave this school."
And since then, I've made the decision to not leave the school. Me taking away, like, the personal stuff, the frustrations and all of that stuff, the lack of decent teacher pay and all of that, I realized that who's there now, we've been put there for a reason.
Mhm.
And this year, with how we've worked with COVID and everything that's going on, we were all put there for a reason. And so, I'm not the person to make hasty decisions. And even if I'm barking and yelling and complaining and fussing and screaming, I'm not gonna move until it's my time to move, until
Mhm.
I know that I've been cleared and directed to move. So, I'm staying put. Don't mind me.
No, but I mean, I think that's real though, because it's just like every day is not glorious, like
Yeah.
It is not.
and sometimes you just like are so frustrated and it's like, oh my
Mm,
gosh, what's the point? And so you do need
Mhm.
those like kind of reminders, like you say, like even just that one student out of however many you had, or like somebody just reminding you of like, okay, maybe this is just a bad day, like you have other things that you really enjoy about it. So
right.
the work, and it's like it's it's hard work. Like it's
Yeah.
hard work and you put a lot of effort into it, and sometimes it is discouraging not to see like that
Mhm.
immediate, results or those immediate responses. But then I
Mhm.
think that taps into you really being passionate or like caring about the work,
Yeah.
because
Mhm.
that I feel like that you have to like always tap back into that of like your why. Like, why am I
Right.
doing this? Why am I here? Why is this important to me? Because one of the reasons why, I just think we really have to reprioritize in our society of like
Mhm.
resources, because
Right.
the
Yeah.
the work that teachers do, I mean, like the salaries should be better.
Yeah.
And hopefully maybe parents will petition for that now that they had to homeschool their kids.
Maybe they've
Girl,
woken
you
up
know
to
they
this fact
will
now.
now. You know they will now.
Anything to get the kids back in school.
Look, what kind of raises do y'all need? We would go to the school board for you.
But Dacia, with like everything going on in the world, how is your organization supportive with the Black liberation movement?
Yeah, so I think one of the things is just kind of how we talked about knowing your foundation. And I think that with all of what's happening right now, history is being exposed.
Right.
And
Mhm.
like history in quotes, air quotes, because
Right.
it's not
It's
really history.
right.
Mhm.
And so I think as far as like stand with purpose and just being able to correct and come from a place of authenticity and truth,
Mhm.
Mhm.
so at a much younger age, it's like, man, you shouldn't have to wait until you go to college or read a book, or like your parents at home telling you this because you won't learn this in school, or
Mhm.
it's
Mhm.
just like by possibly that you might know the actuality or like the true history of our nation, and it just shouldn't be like that. So as far as my organization, it's like being a part of that foundation of really possibly introducing or furthering our knowledge of self and
Mhm.
identity. And I think
Yeah.
once you have that, I think it's very, very hard to, I'm not going to say trick, but kind of trick, because
Right.
it's like for
Right.
all of us, it's like we didn't know it was a trick, but I mean, we study this stuff as fact. But
Right.
Mhm.
I mean, of course, as a young person, you don't have the responsibility of that, that comes with white supremacy, and that's an issue that has to
Mhm.
be corrected by the dominant culture. But
Right.
yeah, I think that one of the beautiful things, even with my nieces and nephews, it's like I'm so excited to teach them these things while they're young,
Yeah.
Mhm.
because they will come up so differently, because they
Mhm.
will already have that sense of self they will already have that sense of self. So if they go into a classroom and they hear history that's not real, they will know like this is not
Right.
true. And they have
Mm.
something to put it up against versus just accepting it as, oh, this is the facts.
Mhm.
And that was gonna be my next question, but you kinda already answered it. I was gonna ask you, why do you think it's so important for us to inform and educate ourselves, about our stories, our truths, our beauty? And, I mean, you basically hit the nail on the
Right.
head.
Well, it's so interesting because I've been, man, like, I'm so bad about staying up late, like really, really, really bad about it because I have to
Me
wake up in
too.
the morning.
Me
Mhm.
too.
But I just like do a lot of reading and articles, and
Mhm.
like I just watched this. It was kind of a TED talk, and I can't think of the guy's name, but he was a criminal attorney, and he has this whole special about like Confederate monuments and flags and all these things. And he said the past, knowing the truth about the past is important, and people try to pretend that, like, oh no, we're here now, so get over it, or
Mhm.
we're here
Mhm.
now, let's just worry about the future. But it's like,
Oh, that was 400 years ago.
Mhm.
right. But it's like the past is what everything is founded on. Like,
Mhm.
so the
Mhm.
present, like, we can't go forward if we don't even have the truth about the past, because that's
Right,
where everything is, referenced. It's
right,
like we
right.
go back to all these things of like, oh, wow, this is why it's like this, because this thing
Mhm.
happened and then this thing happened. But it's like, well, that's why it's important to make sure all that stuff is correct, because
Mhm.
we can't
Yeah.
get to the truth of now. Like, even when you talk
Right.
about the wealth gap and education and
Mhm.
housing, and why the wealth gap is so huge between black and white people. It's like we can't talk about that without talking about redlining, or talking
Yeah.
about,
Right.
black people not being able to buy houses in certain communities,
Mhm.
or the fact that, people couldn't read, or the fact that we can only go to certain school, so it's
Yeah.
like the
Yeah.
past is connected to the present.
Right.
Yep.
So we can't just turn a new leaf without understanding that all of this, of where we are now, is because of all this discrimination and injustices of
Mhm.
the past. And so,
Right.
but to highlight it and to talk about it means that you have to fix it. And that's
Yeah.
what
That's
people
right.
don't want to do.
That's
It's
right.
kinda
That is
like
right.
they're scared to do it, and I'm like, "What are you so afraid of?" I even had to tell someone who was, like, questioning why, like, Black people was offended by I can't even remember what it was, but I just looked at him and I said, "This is something that you just learned about today. This is something that Black people been knowing about for years and been knowing,
The
like."
Aunt Jemima syrup thing.
Yes, and been knowing, like, the racial implications behind the name and the image. We've been knowing about this for years. You just found out about it today. So you
Right.
can't tell me how to take this and how to feel and, like, how to express myself. Like, you can't tell me. And it's because a lot of people just don't know the history. So I'm thankful for organizations like yours who's just
Mhm.
starting people out while they're young so they can get them there. Because we have friends. And me, I don't know if you remember this when we were playing like a game one time and it was Black History and it was literally like me, you, and one other person who knew the answers, and like no one else knew the answers to none of the questions. And it's because we have families who like stress the importance of those topics on us and
Mhm.
just kind of drove it into our minds because they really want us to know our history so that we can know who we were and like we can know
Mhm.
what we would have to deal with in the future. I remember looking at my daddy and thinking, boy, you crazy because ain't none of this happening today. But now I'm just so thankful that he taught me all these things because, I look at people who didn't have that same upbringing and it's like you really have to unlearn and
Mhm.
re-educate yourself right
Mhm.
now, and it's
Yeah.
Mhm.
so hard for them because it's so hard for them to accept that their great
'Cause it's
country of
foreign.
America, like, would do something like this to them, and I'm just like, "Girl." And it's crazy because 'cause I'm like sometimes I'm like, "Do I sound like a conspiracy theorist sometimes when I'm talking?" Because, like, to me, it's the truth, but to a lot of conspiracy theorists, they think they're speaking the truth. And like
Mm.
I feel like to those people, they perceive me as that when I'm talking about like these points in history that they have no idea about and they're just looking at me, especially white people. Like I've actually had somebody tell me that that didn't happen. And I'm like, yes, you can look it up. And I know there's not like a lot on it, but you have to remember that because of white supremacy, like a lot of times our history tried to be erased, but I
Right.
feel like
And was.
yeah, like if you're bold enough to do it, if you're bold enough to do it, be bold enough to let it be put out there so everybody could know. Don't try to erase
Mhm.
what you're trying to erase it for.
Yeah, but the sad thing is like, it's like they don't even find the value and importance of recording it because it's
Right.
like they don't even view us as like worthy of
Right.
documentation,
Right.
And
Mhm.
it's like
Right.
it's so sad because even when we think about like our names, our identity, it's like we none of us really know what our
Mm,
names are,
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
right.
because everyone has a colonized name or whatever the people who enslaved them
Mhm.
named people. So,
Mhm.
and of course, like some people might still have roots, like connection to their roots, and I'm more
Right.
so talking about like Black Americans who
Right.
Mhm.
are may not have that same type of documentation all the way back. But if
Mhm.
it was a people who did record it, you do have some people who come from enslaved backgrounds that the recordings and the documentation was there, so they know more. But I'm
Yeah.
just saying, like in general,
Most
no.
of us, it
I
was
just
distorted. Yeah.
yeah, and I'm really I'm torn between the fact of like people not knowing or just people denying.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Because I think you have to care to study and I think you have to care to want to learn something new, especially about another group of people that you've never had to learn about.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Our history, like our schools, there is no requirement to learn our history. And
Mhm.
Right.
so all this time we've been taught that you don't have to learn about Black people. You don't have to learn about Black
Right.
heritage, Black culture, Black writers, inventors. All this kind of stuff has been like erased. It's been removed from history. So now we're trying to tell people like, oh, this is important. Like now
Right.
you care. And it's like, for the people who choose to, they are going to be the people who like really, dive into it. But I
Mhm.
think there are also people who it's a benefit to have privilege.
Ooh,
So
Absolutely.
girl.
if
Absolutely.
if your privilege is lessened and you
Mhm.
no longer have an advantage because of the color of your skin and
Mhm.
things become an even playing field, then you really are having to compete for jobs and
Mhm.
housing and your credit score and all these things. So it's like the advantage is there. So on the other side of it is like I don't really wonder why people don't want things to change because
Yeah.
they have centuries lead in advantages.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
if you
They
take
do.
that away, then it's like, ugh,
Yeah.
Even the little bit of advancement that's happening now, white folks out here losing their minds
Girl.
behind it.
all the
Like
videos, right? I'm like, goodness.
the Karens and the Chads are out here losing it in every Trader Joe's and every gas station. They are out here tripping, tripping.
And isn't it so sad
Just off of
though?
that.
And like it's just
It's so
like
sad to watch.
but they just walk to their car and the police aren't called. You know what I mean? And it's just like I think
Mhm.
these videos too. It also highlights the difference of treatment. Like
Yeah.
Oh,
people,
absolutely.
you call the police on people walking down the street who look suspicious, and these
Mhm.
people
So
are
wild.
raising a ruckus in
Mhm.
businesses, outside of restaurants, and it's just like man, the difference. What they say, the two Americas. Like,
Right.
Yeah, yeah. The
Yeah.
two Americas we live in. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
And it's crazy that they don't realize their privilege in those moments, but I'm really not surprised. I had someone before um tell me like all their history, right? And they're telling me
mhm.
like about their ancestors and they're from Ireland and he had like these artifacts in his house and then he asked me about mine and I just looked at
Mhm.
him like, "Are you serious?" And it's just like right in that moment, like you didn't even realize the privilege you had to
Right,
know your ancestral history.
right.
Because
You know what else?
what?
It is a privilege and a benefit that they don't have to recognize their privilege.
Right.
It did not even dawn on him
That would
that
be
he has his
offensive.
privilege. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't even think twice about it. But it's something that we have to live with every
Mhm.
single day.
Mhm.
That's so they can be upset. They can be mad because this is just like the tip of the iceberg. We haven't even gotten into it really good yet.
Right.
One of my teacher friends was saying, and a lot of people have been saying this sentiment, y'all are lucky that we just want a little equality, that we are really not out for revenge.
Yeah.
Because if we were, as Black people as a whole, were out for revenge,
Mhm.
do you know the shape this country would be in while y'all are worried about looting and whatnot? We
Yeah.
want you to recognize us and value us for who we are as human beings.
Yeah.
You're lucky we don't want revenge on y'all.
Very
Mhm.
true. Very true. And that's why it's like, the amount of built up just
Mm.
discrimination and racism and so it's like of course people want to riot.
Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
It's like of course, and people have been doing this throughout history, and I think that's another thing that's kind of bothersome because you know I think the way that it's portrayed is that like people have always just sat back and taken this, and it's not true. Like
Mhm.
throughout history, people have gone up against the system. Like
Mhm.
this
Mhm.
moment, I think is so different just because social media and
Yeah.
everything is broadcasted and we are so connected more than ever. Like you say, like even globally. But
Mhm.
I think I don't know if y'all have read the 1619 by Nicole Hannah Jones, but in the New York
Yeah,
Times
yeah.
magazine. But she talks about that Black people have held this country to the up, like forced this country to look at the ideals that you say you believe in and how you're not
Mhm.
living up to them. So even, the sit-ins and all this kind of stuff, it's like, oh, your law says this, but then you do this. And so I think it's just been a constant resistance. And I just think
Mhm.
now it's like just a moment where it's all coming together and it's all aligned. But man, our people have been fighting like
Yeah,
from the
yeah.
beginning. And it's just so sad and so exhausting too, though, because like, man, like do you have to fight forever? And I think
Yeah.
that's
Right?
where those like the when we talk about the importance of community and just self-care and being around your loved ones and just having spaces where you feel safe and accepted and all of those things because in the outside world like it's very rare to find that and it's very rare to find those spaces that it's like okay, I'm good here, like I'm safe here because I'm like more concerned to get in my car and drive now, probably than ever before.
Right,
And
right,
it
Yes.
was
especially here.
probably the same, like I think it was the same, like the same mentalities existed. But I think now with the current administration, people are just emboldened. So
Oh,
I
yeah.
think people are more comfortable with acting it out and doing things publicly that maybe they would have said or done behind closed doors. But now people are
Mhm.
doing it like,
Oh, it's
just
blatant now,
yeah,
yeah.
it's
Yeah.
just blatantly out there. So
Mhm.
now it's just like we really have to be careful. And I talked to one of our family friends, and she was in the civil rights movement, and she helped integrate like a school. And she was like, "I know that y'all have not lived through this period before, but
Mhm.
do not go out." At certain times of night now, like, do
Mhm.
not go by yourself. Like, it's like really giving us a course of like, okay, you are up against white supremacists. Like,
Right.
you
Mhm.
have to understand what that means. And when she was talking to me, I was just like, wow.
Yep.
Mhm.
That's so interesting that you mentioned, having a safe space for us when you're in the fight against basically this system. We
Right.
have to find really good ways to take care of ourselves. So, you have this event that you're going to put on. Can
Mhm.
you talk a little bit about Too Faced and what it's all about, when it's gonna be, where it's gonna be, so forth and so on?
Yes. So Two Face is going to be Stand with Purpose, our first like kind of spoken word slam show. And it'll be in October in Lake Charles. So I'm excited
Nice.
about that. The reason why I brought it back to Lake Charles is because, my family isn't originally from Louisiana. My parents are from Cleveland, Ohio, and
Oh, okay.
my dad was in the military. So that's how we ended up in Louisiana.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I spent so much of my, like childhood in Louisiana, Lake Charles specifically. So it was like, it kind of was full circle for me of
Mhm.
like bringing this program to youth in Lake Charles and being able to have our first show there. So that's a
Yeah.
little bit about like why I chose Lake Charles. And then, so on August 1st, we're going to open up applications for, it'll be about 7 to 10 young people. And
Okay.
what's going to happen is we'll start working with them from like August up until October. So
Mhm.
most likely like virtually, like we'll have
Mhm.
sessions and spoken word, sessions and ciphers and those kind of things, and bring
Mhm.
in different artists and writing coaches and public speakers to help them just strengthen their gifts. And then we're going to have like the actual performance in October. So I'm really excited about that. I think that the viewing of it will be virtual just
Okay.
because with everything that's going on, I wouldn't want to host like this mega event right now.
Right.
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 I think that that's going to be the best way to do it. That like the participants will be there in person and it'll still be safe and like social distance and all of that. But like the
Mhm.
public will be able to tune in and
Mhm.
see the show. So I'm like so excited about it.
It sounds
Yeah,
amazing.
I was really
Great.
excited. When I saw your post about it, I told Mia, I was like, Dacia is putting on like an event for young Black creatives called Two Face. And I was like, I really want to talk to her about it. And I also want to check it out. But now that it's
Mhm.
virtual, I'm still
Mhm.
going to check it out.
I
I just
know.
I'll
was
be
Oh
like,
tuned
man,
in,
that'd be
center.
so good. I appreciate that. No, I
Mhm.
really appreciate the support and a little bit about the name. So it's so funny because we're
Yeah,
talking about all
yeah.
this
Two-faced.
stuff, and like when you, I think like in slang world, when somebody two faced, it's like,
Mhm.
oh, you kind
Mhm.
of pretender, like you pretend that you're
right.
me, but then when I walk away, you have other things to say, and
Mhm.
so I thought about that in terms of like what our nation is experiencing right now. And
Mhm.
it's this idea of what it is, but then like when you take off the mask, like
Mhm.
what's underneath that. So that's kind of like the
Mm.
theme of where we're going and just how people interpret that, because I think people can interpret that word, like that theme so many different ways.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's just a starting point, and it'll be really interesting to see where they take it, like the participants, like what that means to them. And so I'm excited about it. I'm really excited.
Let me tell you how
That's gonna
deep
be great.
like I went into this. I was like, okay, so Two Face, because America present itself as one thing, but then behind our backs, they do it something else. I was in my spoken word mind, when I was processing it.
Snap, snap.
That's accurate though. I'm glad that like you because I feel like that is part of it, and I think everybody can kind of relate to that. And even if people don't relate to it about what's going on now, it's like at some
Mhm.
point, you might have experienced
Mhm.
Right.
something
Yep.
that appeared to be something that is not.
Mhm.
For
Definitely.
sure. So we'll wrap it up, but go ahead and plug your social media and tell everybody where they can find
Mhm.
you. Tell
Photos by
everybody,
Dacia. Yeah,
yeah, tell
everything.
tell us where we can
Awesome.
connect with you.
Well, first, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity. This has been like good for my soul. Like,
Girl, thank you for the opportunity. It was an opportunity for us to speak to you. So I,
thank
I want you to know
Seriously.
you.
we were fangirling. We have been fangirling over you, and we talk about
Mhm.
you all the time. So it was just a natural selection when we was like, we have our 10th episode. Who do we want to have on? Dacia. It was just like that.
I'm telling you, I woke up in the middle of the night and I was like, duh.
Right. It was just
I
so
appreciate
easy.
that. The sentiments are mutual. I appreciate it. And I so enjoy the podcast. It's so fun because it's like the fact that y'all are best friends is so clear because it's just so natural and so funny. Like when I listen, I'm just laughing and just y'all are having a good time. And like this is so important because like you say, our voices, like having that space for our voices and you know, being able to tell our own stories is so, so important. So I just want to say thank y'all for that. And as far as my social media, my Instagram, my personal Instagram is Dacia Idom, DaciaIdom. Stand with Purpose is at Stand with Purpose, spelled out. And then my photography is at Photos by Dacia Idom, so spelled the same way as my personal account.
Awesome. We definitely appreciate you coming on. Been waiting for this.
Let me just say, so Facebook is the same. Like they're all the same on Facebook too. But I'm just like excited just for this episode, but then also for what you're doing. So y'all are bringing joy to people in a really like tough spot. So you know that's important too.
Thank you. Look at all these kudos we're giving each other. About. Thank you,
That Black
sis.
Girl
That Black
Magic.
Girl Magic.
Yes. On 1,000. So yeah, like we were saying, thank you for joining us, and we will wrap up this not so private conversation.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
Thank you. We'll talk to you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, LDBs, we are super excited to announce an up-and-coming Black business by our really good friend Ashley Robinson called Saritha's Kitchen in Lake Charles, Louisiana. Saritha's Kitchen was inspired by her love for cooking and how it brings family together. Ashley will be having a Kickstarter fundraising event on July 15th, 16th, and 17th from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. I don't want to give too much info away to you guys, so make sure y'all swing by her Facebook page. That's SAYRETHA' Kitchen, and check out and pre-order from their La Carte menu. Thank you so much, long distance besties, for joining us again for another not so private conversation. Don't forget to check us out on Instagram at Jeanne V. Williams. That's at Jeanne, Jeanne V. Williams, and at Perfectly Mia. That's at Perfectly MIA. And if you have any topic suggestions or any questions, shoot us an email at notsoprivatepod@gmail.com.
Make sure you hit the subscribe button. We definitely appreciate it. Remember to leave a review on Spotify, Apple, and Google. You can also find us at Radio Public, Pocket Cast, Overcast, and Breaker. And you can find us on anchor.fm/notsoprivatepod. Now you can also hear us on YouTube. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, the Not So Private Podcast channel. Now, with all of that being said, join us next time for another Not So Private conversation.